Hello, this week we are going to be solving really basic trig equations. We are actually almost finished with all of our curriculum. There's really not much left in this this whole unit. What we're going to be doing is, like I said, solving basic trig equations, and we're going to be using the unit circle. I urge you to go back to the previous assignments, the one that has one of the unit circles on it, or one that has a blank unit circle, and I can also put that up, and we're going to be using this. And so the first thing I look at is I notice this is from a week ago from the notes, I believe. It says sine x equals a half. So I have to find where the sine is a half. Now remember that sine is y. And so I have to find where is y a half. And it looks like it's a half here at 30 degrees. And that's not the only place that it's a half, because if I go around to here, this is also a half. So I have to list that as well, 150. And so for most of these, you're actually going to have two answers. Usually one in either the first and the second, or the first and the fourth, or the first and the third, or sometimes the second and the third quadrants. You're going to have two angles that are not necessarily in the same quadrant. In fact, they're almost never in the same quadrant. And so once in a while when it's a quadrant angle, we might have only one answer, but if you only have one answer, you might want to go back and check, because chances are you're missing something. Here's another one. It says sine x equals negative root 3 over 2. And so I'm going to look at my unit circle. I know that sine is y, and I know that sine, all of these y's are positive. So I'm going to look down here for negative root 3 over 2 as a y. I'm actually going to even mark that. That's y. And so I find here's a y that's negative root 3 over 2, and here's a y that's negative root 3 over 2. And it looks like it's 240 degrees or 300 degrees. And in fact, on this unit circle, I even have the radians. So you could even write your answer in radians. I'm not going to require you to. If we were in class, we would have been dealing with radians a lot. But since we're not in class, I'm sticking to degrees, because I really just want you to get the idea of how to do this before you go to pre-calculus, rather than worrying about whether you can also do it in radians. Here's another one. It says tangent equals -1. Now remember that tangent is not on the unit circle. You actually have to use the unit circle to find tangent. And recall from last week that the angle that has a tangent of 1 is actually 45 degrees. Now if I find the tangent here, because these two are exactly the same, the tangent's actually going to be 1. And also in the third quadrant, it's going to be 1. So I have to find, because it's negative, because it's tangent, and it's negative, I have to find where the signs are not the same. So where it's one positive and one negative. And that's here, one negative, one positive. So I have my answer right there, 135. And I have an answer here, 315. And so I write that. X equals 135. X equals 315. And I'm finished. Another one, tangent, is root 3 over 3. And again, if you recall from last week, to get root 3 over 3, you actually have to have the 1/2 over root 3 over 2, which is 30 degrees. And so I have to find where else are x and y exactly the same. And that's here in the third quadrant. If I used this here, I'd have a positive over a negative. Tangent would be negative. If I was in the fourth quadrant, same thing. I have a positive, here I have a negative over a positive. Tangent would be negative. Oops, not -1, just negative. Just a negative. Here, tangent is positive, and in the third quadrant, it's positive. So I'm looking for first quadrant, 30 degrees. Third quadrant, 210. If you don't remember the tangents, or if you haven't done the assignment from last week, go look at last week's notes. Last week's notes actually have the tangents of some of these angles. The last one is tangent equals to negative root 3. And if this is 30 degrees, this is going to be the 60. It's different, and it's negative, which means, again, I'm looking for negative tangents. I have 120, and looks like 300. And that's really all there is to it. I'm going to put up some flashcards, some digital flashcards for you. It's not an assignment. It's just going to be resource for you if you want to try to quiz yourself on these, because at some point in pre-calculus you will have to memorize them. In my class, I'm not making you memorize them because we're not in class. And all of your tests, your final exam will be online. So as a result, you really don't have to memorize them, but you will need to know them next week. And so if you have any questions, please come to our class meeting at 2:15. Yes, 2:15 on Tuesday, or you can email me or private message me through Classroom. And I hope that you have a wonderful week.